All right, guys, we're going to talk about electro-etching, and that's where you take a stencil like this, and there's probably 2 dozen different places that'll make this silk screen stencil for you. You'll send them artwork, they'll charge you an art charge, you'll get back a little sheet, 3x7, something like that, and you'll have several images on there, probably another $50. So it depends on who you're buying them from. There's a couple guys active around the knife community making these things. Then you've got companies like Electro-Etch or Marking Methods or some of the others out there. We had these made for us by Electro-Etch. Now you can also make your own. That's a whole nother subject. We're not going to get into that today. But you can buy the raw stencil material. We sell it, and the developer and expose your own. And that's great if you're going to do one-offs or you're doing custom logos, that kind of stuff. But if you're going to use production ones, probably better to go a little commercial. They'll hold up. Now these are stencils with the material on them, and then there's a screen in there, and you'll see that screen that is where the resist is removed, and that's what actually puts the mark on the knife. So if we look at this one says Dog Bite. That's our brand of knives that we're putting out. So this goes right over there, and we'll apply some etch solution and electricity. It'll remove the metal and then blacken it. Okay, so let's take a look here. This is our kit. This is just one option out there. You can get what you need, but this is what we have. We sell several different ones, and this is our brand. This Knife Dog Etcher, it's a 3-amp variable. It'll have a DC edge or AC mark, and it's got a pot there for adjusting. That comes with a set of instructions, got some deep etch pads, a little tray, SC44 for stainless, and then Electrolyte there, plus an applicator. So that's what that kit looks like. Good for that. We'll set that to the side, and we'll show you how we're going to etch some of these. So the applicator that comes with our kit is a tube affair. And the idea is, in a high volume kind of environment, you would fill this tube up with liquid and it would drizzle down into the pad. In the real world, in our world, we probably would never do that. You just put a little solution on the pad and you're good. No, these pads have some differences. And you'll find different applications. Marking tools, marking knives, marking a lot of things. It's big business. In the knife community, our needs are a little bit more narrow. But overall, marking equipment, tools, things like that, parts is a huge business. And so you'll find a lot of different applicators, a lot of different size applicators, a lot of different types of pads. And what we're going to show you today is a deep edge pad. Now this is a really fuzzy kind of deep pad. And what that does is that actually sends some of those little fibers right through the stencil. And they'll poke through, and that's what helps you give a nice deep edge. So you'll see those little fibers come through the screen. Well, it's hard to see actually, but they'll come through the screen. They'll conduct electricity through the solution and give you a deeper etch. When you do an etch like this, it's into the metal. That's probably 3 or 4 thousandths deep in there. You can run your fingernail across it and feel that it's really quite deep in there. And then it's blackened. So kind of a walkthrough, and you're going to see this on every etcher. You're going to find something called DC or AC, and then an adjuster on some that adjusts the power. This one's a 3-amp. We've got a 5-amp that we use in house here that we custom order. So the DC. That sends current one way the whole time. It's always going the same way. And so what happens, and we'll plug one of these in quick. Red is hot, and you would put, this comes with a lead and an alligator clip. So in practice, we'll take and just use a simple rubber band to hold this on. Some have clips or retainers or different things. It's just what we had here, so I grabbed it. Okay. So there is the applicator and what it's going to be, and what we do is we put a little solution on there. We'd have this stencil on there, put that on, we turn the juice on, and so that current is going through the knife, okay, coming out the machine, going this way, and it's flowing back through the applicator. And what it's doing on DC, it's removing metal. Using in combination with the solution and the electricity, it's actually pulling metal up through the screen, depositing it in here, and that's where you're getting metal removed. That's the DC function, okay? Then when you're going to do that for a little bit, and we'll show you how. Then you switch it to AC, and you're back on the same mark. You're going to have the stencil right there. And what's happening there now, that current is going back and forth 60 times a second. And what it's doing is it's removing metal through the screen, and then it's putting it right back onto the knife, and it's doing that 60 times a second. And so what happens is it turns that metal that it's removing and redepositing through that 60 cycles a second, US current, it's turning that black and junky and depositing it on the metal, and that's where the black comes from. So in a nutshell, put your stencil on, hook up your leads, run it on DC, and you're going to do it 5 or 6 times for about 15 seconds, and you'll see that. I'll show you that. And then you flip the switch, do it on AC to darken the mark, pull your stencil off, hit it with some Electrolyte because that will neutralize the acid, wipe your blade off, and you're good. Now there's some things, there's a learning curve. It's not exactly that simple. Nothing is. So we'll get set up here and give us a second, then we get some things going and we'll etch one. All right, so I've got the machine hooked up here, power's off. I'm going to connect the red lead. Make sure I'm on DC. I'm going to collect the red lead there. This is built in where the black lead is connected to the applicator. Now this stencil, again, these are going to come in sheets, or you can make your own, and you're going to just cut them off a little bit. Now what you want to do is you want to mask these off. So this is just black vinyl electric tape, and you're going to want to cut several pieces off, and you're going to use that as a mask around the stencil because the applicator is oversized and you don't want to touch that applicator to anywhere on the blade, or you're going to leave an etch mark, black mark, and then you're not going to like that. So here we go, got just some masking or vinyl electric tape, and I'm going to put that on the stencil and mask it off. I'm going to go just under there. So I've got that just under there, and I'll block that off. Put another piece on the side. I'm going to get close as I can to the mark. Now if there's any puckers in here, I can see a pucker in there. What's going to happen is solution is going to get underneath the tape, and then it's going to migrate all the way to the edge, and that current, when you're actually applying the mark, your applicator could be over here, but if there's a leak in that solution or underneath the tape or your mask, and we've seen this, you'll get a little channel of liquid going under there, and it'll come out over here, and you'll get a mark that you don't want on your blade way over here, because that electric current is going to flow it all the way. So you want to really mask that off and make sure there's nowhere for that solution to go. Make sure it's flat, dead flat, or your mark's going to be fuzzy. Okay? When we're doing this, we're marking 10, 20 at a time, so we tend to use 2 pieces like this, and we'll put them on, but we're going to we'll get a third on there. All right, so we get this huge mask. You could put another piece up there, but for right now we're not going to do that. So I'm going to just find a spot on this. Here's a test blade that we've been practicing on and finding settings. When you're doing your first etch, man, don't do it on your knife right away. Practice on the same kind of steel and make sure in the same finish, and make sure you get the settings and the timings down, so you're not, you get a brand new etch machine, you go hit your knife that you put 20 hours in, you blow the etch, wreck the knife. That's not how you want to learn this. This takes practice, just like knife making. So find a piece of steel. This is an old blade blank on this line that we couldn't use. So I'm going to put that on there, and I want that nice and flat. There's no puckers. Got that mask all the way around. And so that's exactly where I want that mark. Okay, so I've got it masked off. Now you can see where that applicator will go like that, and it's not going to touch any of the metal around, and everything has to go through the stencil. So now I've got this ready to go. How much solution to put in your pad? Not much. Most guys put way too much. You want just a little in there. Now that's almost dry because I've tamped all that moisture out. This is SC44. Now there's all different kinds of electrolyte, and they're chemically made for stainless or carbon steel or tool steel. We carry 4 different kinds, and SC44 is the general purpose stainless one, and there's not necessarily a chemical that will work perfect for all types of metal. So you may have to have a couple. If you're working in different kinds of metal, stainless or carbon or things like that, you're going to have to jump around and try. Some of this is just trial and error. Okay, so I'm going to put some on my applicator, and then I'm going to tamp most of that out because I don't want that liquid flowing all around and getting on the blade where it doesn't need to be. All you want is that moist, and you don't want it sopping wet. You can see there's no moisture coming out, so I'm going to turn that on. I'm on DC, and this thing has a gauge on it, and yours probably will too, whatever you get. The more expensive ones have a gauge. I'm just go to 5 because it's right in the middle of the dial. And so now I'm all ready, checked everything. I'm going to land that on there. A little pressure, not much. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to lift that off, and what happens is you'll see a bunch of bubbles in there, and that's called degassing. And what you don't want is just to stay on there for 2 minutes and have a bubble, and that bubble insulates the electro-etch action, and you end up with only a partial mark. So what you do is you put your applicator on for a few seconds, count to 10, count to 15, whatever you want to do. Lift it up, degas it, go back and hit it again. Now as I'm doing this, I can actually feel the current. I can feel the hum on here. It's not going to hurt you, but you might feel a slight tingle and that kind of stuff. We're going to do that about 4 times. I can really feel the current going in there, and I can see the stencil getting dark where the metal is moving from the blade into the pad. Okay, and you can see some of that metal is actually getting deposited in there. I've got a lot of moisture on there, don't need that much. Dry that out. Okay, that diminished the electro. I can feel the current is diminished a little bit on that, and that's fine. Now in practice, you're going to hold that down for 10-15 seconds. You can do that 4 or 5 times. And that's just rule of thumb. Now the longer you do it, the deeper the etch is going to get to a practical limit. And then after that, after my experience, yours may be different. After about 4 or 5 times of that, your etch starts to get fuzzy, you get a halo around it, and it's less sharp. So kind of start, and when you're doing practicing, do 3 or 4 cycles, 10 seconds at a time. Again, you can feel that in there. Now, here's where you want to peak, and if you move the stencil, you're going to get a bad effect. So we're just going to go right to AC, and again, that's going to blacken it. We've actually got, I'll show you. We can peel that back. Now you can see it's dark, bit of a halo, and we'll sand or buff some of that out, but it's in there deep. Okay, you can feel that scraping across your fingernail. Now that black stuff there comes off really easy. And in fact, Dustin, our guy in here, when he goes through and does a lot of blades to put marks on, he'll take a popsicle stick and scrape that junk off because it doesn't stick well. So we've got that. You can do that or not. We'll put that back right where that is. And now we've got it on AC. Keep it on the same dial. Again, you can feel the current going through. This doesn't take as long because you're not really moving metal. You're putting it back and forth, and you're getting a nice black mark. Again, you can see the bubbles. We're just degassing. We'll hold it down for 5-10 seconds, and we'll do that for the same amount. Now, as you're developing your formula and your process to your particular machine, there's a lot of homemade machines out there, a lot of commercial machines, that kind of stuff. Just remember, right on the machine what it is. We've just done so many of these. So this is basically done. And there's the stencil. Now, first thing you do is put a little Electrolyte on it. And that neutralizes that pH acid kind of thing in the etch solution. It's not going to hurt you, but it is. You don't want to leave it on the blade, so neutralize it. Okay. So now what we've got right here, you can see it's really dark. It's got a bit of a halo on there, so we probably went just a little bit too long. You can feel that it's in the metal. You can hear it running across my fingernail maybe. And that. So I'll take this over to the buffer and I'll hit it just a little bit, clean off some of that halo. You might want to sand it, depends on the finish of how you're doing it. But clean up some of that and you've got your mark done. Now, so that's that. Now we've got this stencil and the screen is all junked up with metal. You can see where that was white. There's a new one or a cleaner one. That's white. And when we just did this, a lot of that metal moved from the blade, got clogged in the screen, didn't quite make it to the applicator. So these stencils, you should get anywhere from 50 to 200 impressions. That's a lot. Now, if you don't take care of them, you'll get 5 or less. So here we are. We've got this screen. It's all clogged up. The metal went up that way. So let's take and put that upside down. And we'll pretend this is a scrap piece of metal. You'd have somewhere else. Let's run that on DC. We'll kind of turn up the current a little bit. And so what I'm doing now is I'm pulling more metal through, and I'm going to scrub that a little bit. And I'm unclogging. If I go too long, I'm going to clog it from the other side, but just that little bit of action cleaned up that stencil quite a bit. Now you want those stencils clean. And now if you really want to get fancy, and I would, is you change your leads around black to red. So let's switch those leads. Now what we're doing is I've got the stencil face up. I'm showing you 2 different ways to clean the screen. So now I've got the leads reversed and I've got it on DC. Power is going to go from the applicator through the stencil into the blade, which happens to be our pretend scrap piece of metal. We're talking about cleaning the screen. So I'm kind of scrubbing that on there because just that little scrubbing action kind of helps. I can feel the current pop me there. Okay, so now I've reversed the leads, ran the power back down through this way. I deposited that junk somewhere on our pretend scrap piece of metal here. And that really cleaned the screen. Now to finish, get all that. Remember we talked earlier about too much moisture channeling into this tape, and we've gotten bit by this a couple times, and you will too unless you watch for it. If you're doing a bunch of consecutive marks or you're using too much solution, that solution can migrate around the ridges in here. And if we pull this off, you're going to find where moisture started to migrate from the screen area underneath that little bitty crack and was making its way over here, and it would have left a mark here, even though the applicator might have been all the way over here, because that current goes through all the liquid. That current will follow that little stream of liquid or wherever your mask is weak, and if there's water that's ponded up here, or solution that's ponded up, you'll have a black mark or an etch mark. So you want to be careful on that. Don't use too much solution, rub it off. So here we're done with this mark. I'm going to clean that up. I've rinsed out the screen because I did it backwards. I'm going to take a little Electrolyte, rub that on the stencil, and get that pH balanced so it's not quite so acidic. And that stencil now is all clean, ready for use. I'll lay that flat somewhere. I'll keep it out of UV. These are activated by UV. So don't leave them out in your shop or in the lights. Put them in an envelope or something. Keep them out of the light, because that will attack the resist. That's how these are made, through UV. So that's clean, ready to go. Often or occasionally, until you get it dialed in, you'll end up with a fuzzy mark that has a halo or something. You can buff it, you can sand it. Now if you buff it, you're going to reduce some of the black inside of that mark. Solution to that is surprising. Here we've got an etch mark, and it didn't blacken very well there. We buffed it off earlier so you could see this. So you can see where it's lighter there, darker there. I'm going to just take a Sharpie and I'm going to darken that in, and that will clean up and darken that some. Now if you want to get really fancy, and I've had to do this on customs, get in there and darken it in with a little dark fresh Sharpie. That one's acting up, but you'll see what I mean. Just get in there and darken that up a little bit, and your mark will get darker. Honestly, it might bug you, but no one else is going to notice. It's just the nature of marks. It's not that big a deal. But again, if you dial in your formula, we're just ripping through this real quick for the video. Absolutely practice. Dial in your formula to keep count of your counts, you know, your DC and your AC, and put that in there. Now, a couple options. When you're marking, you do not have to follow up the AC with the DC. If you just use DC, you're going to get what's referred to as a frosted etch, and it'll leave a deep mark as long as you do it in that way. And then it's not going to be black, it's going to be kind of frosted. And so we'll see if we can get that to show up here. I'm holding this down in place so it doesn't move. Lastly, it's just a scrap piece here, but you definitely want to hold that in place. And we're just trying to show you something here. All right, now that actually showed black, but if I rub it and buff it, you can see where that lightens up. And it's actually a frosted look. Doesn't look bad. It's maybe not a bad way to go. It's an option. So you can end up with that deep etch, and you can feel that with your nails, but it's not going to be black. It's the AC that lifts that metal and off and redeposits. That's where the black comes from. The DC removes metal and leaves a frosted image. Now, alternatively, so that's one option. You can leave it that way. If you're just doing some quick dirty etches and you just want a black mark and you got to move right along, you can skip the DC. You can skip that deep etch. Just put a surface mark, and I'll hold that on there. And what you're going to do here is you're just putting a black mark right on the surface. It's fairly durable. It's going to wear off after a while. The deep etch has the, protects it a little bit because it's deep down 3-4 thousandths deep on that surface. But certainly quick, really quick black mark. And those tend to be way crisper. That looks way nicer than a deep etch. Honestly, it's going to hold up fairly well. And so that's an option. And if you want a super crisp, super dark black mark, just use the AC function and go back and forth a little bit. The longer you go, it's going to start getting fuzzy, and then you're going to have a chance of water or etch channeling out and leaving a mark where you don't want it. So that is etching in a nutshell. Practice a little bit, you'll get a great mark, and we'll see you out there.